Welcome to Road to Cana, where we talk about marriage readiness for single Catholics.
On the road to Cana, there's gonna be terrain, 'cause a life of love takes time to find the way. On the road to Cana, remember who's the key, 'cause if marriage is to last, it will take three. 'Cause if marriage is to last, if marriage is to last, 'cause if marriage is to last, it will take three. On the road, we'll take three. On the road, we'll take three. On the road, we'll take three. On the road.
Welcome back. We're here again with Father Connolly. Edward Connolly is a pastor of the Diocese of Allentown, and we have our special guest, Steve Prinzivalli, and he's from New York. Welcome, gentlemen. We are talking today about men. We are men, so it sounds funny to say we're talking about men, but what we're really talking about are men issues, popular to things that have to do with dating, with pursuing, finding a future spouse, with marriage itself and successful marriage. So we'll address some of the main issues today if we can. I wanted to start, though, by asking Father, what do you see as kind of the main issue from your observations working as a pastor, priest with men, and as being a major issue when it comes to men and their capability of approaching dating and marriage itself?
I've talked to men, and they are rather nervous, it seems. The virtuous ones are nervous, and the not so virtuous ones are not nervous enough, shall we put it that way. I would say that some men, unfortunately, look at women as objects. They go after women much as one would go after a car, to see which model would be most suitable for my needs, which has the most bells and whistles, which one can satisfy me the most. Other men, perhaps not so crass, are afraid of women, or they think of every woman as they think of their own mother. Now, there's some advantage to that, but there are more disadvantages because we don't want men looking for mothers. We would hope that they had good mothers, and having been well mothered are now looking for a wife. But some men look for mothers. And some men are unsure of themselves, and they are intimidated also many times by the feminist ethos, that should I do this, should I not do that? There's a poem by T.S. Eliot about a certain Mr. Prufrock. I don't know if you ever heard Mr. Prufrock. He's sort of a classic figure of the nervous gentleman who's not sure, should I do this, should I do that? Am I okay, am I not okay? That sort of thing. It's a mixed bag.
Yeah, definitely. Those are excellent points. There's a lot to chisel away at here. I'll ask Steve, just in general, just for starters, for you, what do you think would be at the core? It's kind of a very rooted, major issue for men as far as their ability or capability to develop a relationship and enter into marriage.
I think there can be a number of factors, but I think fear, I think that plays a major role. I think they may be insecure. There could be some financial problems as well. Maybe they don't have a good sense of how to manage their money, and maybe they're not financially ready. So there can be a number of, I think, innate fears within men about entering into marriage and hence pursuing a woman for marriage with these things on their mind. And Father hit the nail on the head, a lot of nervousness. I think in general, if you just think about being yourself and, of course, turning to God to help you be yourself and become the best version of yourself and work on virtues, then, and the issue of confidence in approaching a woman, I think guys will have a much easier time of maybe taking that step to approach a woman. So I think there are a lot of fears and perhaps insecurities with men today.
Yes. What does it mean by men were meant to be leaders, the whole leadership role type of thing in a relationship? What does that really mean in essence for in truth?
Men do not get pregnant. By and large, so there may be an exception, but I haven't met it yet. And women do. And so during the time of her pregnancy and the early years of raising a child, nursing the child, taking care of the very physical needs of the child, a woman needs protection. There's no question that she needs protection. And that's not, as some people would say, a sexist statement.
Sorry. Just had to grab that, boy.
I learned in college somewhere the exact name for those little beasts. It's Drosophilus melanogaster, which means black-bellied lovers of the Jew. I thought I would throw that in. Father Mark Bauer taught me that in biology class. Anyway, men need to protect wife and child, okay? And so there is a certain built-in by nature. It's not a conventional decision that men should be leaders. It's part of the natural law. Now we're talking about men in relationship to their wives. We're not necessarily talking about men in relationship to women in general. For example, some people say, oh, well, then you don't think a woman should ever be the president of a corporation or the president of the United States. Now, I'm not endorsing any candidate for president of the United States, that's for sure. But I'm simply saying, as a matter of general principle, a woman could be a leader of a nation. But in her relationship to a man, if the two of them become one, he should be the leader and the protector and the provider. That's sort of basic. That's not rocket science, as they say.
Right. So you don't agree that? Well, I shouldn't say you don't agree. Are men capable, if they're crippled in some way, of taking these roles that we're talking about in relationship or marriage? If they have some issue with that, I mean, is that a decision they can make to just all of a sudden take leadership, become a leader, and because you see, there's a lot of rallying going on to like make men, bring them back and become this and do that, and some men just don't have certain qualities about them. And is it necessary that they be, really powerful-looking, present type of leaders, or can they be a quiet, steady, in the background type of leader?
It has little or nothing to do with physical power to be a man. There's a certain wisdom in the language. You probably know it's kind of a basic Latin word. The Latin word for man in the sense of male, of the male gender, not man in the sense of human being, but the Latin word for man is vir, V-I-R. And that gives us English words like virile, virility, and every man is called to be a vir. Now, if you trace that Latin word back to its roots, it goes back to a more basic Latin word, which is the word vis. And the genitive case of the word vis is virus. And you say, there I got my R, V-I-R. And vis means power, strength, force, okay? So fundamental to our language, if we believe in the wisdom of the ancients, is the idea that the male human being exemplifies force, power, strength. And a human being is primarily a moral entity, secondarily a physical entity. We are souls with bodies, and we are embodied spirits. So there should be a certain strength of spirit, force of spirit in every man. That's essential to being a man. And if a man does not have that moral strength, well, with all due respect to him, I'm sure each individual human being has his story, but he's lacking something. He's lacking something, and that's sad. That's sad.
Yeah. But that lack doesn't necessarily mean it's something that he can just find somewhere and get. I mean, it's may not even be possible to have.
Well, that's kind of a defeatist attitude. Fundamental to the Christian religion is the idea that we can change. We can change. We are the masters of our destiny. There's a certain fundamental package that all of us are given, but we can work on that fundamental package, and we can change. We can make alterations. And there's something which is called God's grace. And God's grace in us is a free gift which enables us to become what he wants us to be. Too many people, both male and female, as we all know, and maybe sometimes you and I might have been guilty of this at some point when we were young and dumb. We might have said, well, you have to accept me the way I am. Well, I do accept the fact that you are as you are, but could you please make some progress toward becoming what you're supposed to be? We are all called to be more than we are.
Steve?
Just to follow up what Father is saying so beautifully, we're called to be the best version of ourselves. We're called to constantly be working toward perfection. Of course, no one is perfect except God. But we can strive to be as much like Jesus Christ as we can. We can strive for those virtues. We can read the Gospels. We can, pray a lot, to go to our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, as Father is saying, ask for these free graces to become better leaders, to become stronger men. And as he was saying, it's not physical strength at all. I strive to be as strong as I can in my morals, in my values, in my Catholic faith as I can. And by praying and staying close to the Lord, by the grace of God, I hope I can get there and keep on strengthening my relationship with God.
Yeah. And certainly, as St. Paul tells us, when we are weak, that's when we are strong. So men really have to do in order to become what they are meant to be as well, right? Take the leadership through in those weaknesses, take those steps.
Yes, I'm glad you cited that verse that Paul said, when I am weak, I am strong, which of course is one of those paradoxes, by which is really saying he is not relying on himself. Too many of us rely on ourselves. God calls us to rely on him. I am strong in him. St. Frances Xavier Cabrini, in fact, we have a statue of her in our church, the church where I'm a pastor, and there's a motto on the statue, and the motto is, I can do all things in him who strengthens me. And so that's a great motto for everyone, male or female. I can do all things in him who strengthens me.
Absolutely. Well, let's take a moment now to turn to our experts and see what they have to say on these subjects regarding men.
I think every woman has their own wants and needs. They're looking for certain, but I think most women, I think it's fair to say, are looking for a man who's a virile, a man who's a leader, a man who's strong, a man who's nurturing in a healthy sense and protective towards his wife and also towards children. But I don't think they'll take the sensitivity they can get. I mean, they obviously want a man who's trying to understand, a man who listens is what they're really interested in more than anything else, which is all, and they're right, because that addresses, I won't say their needs, but addresses their nature as feminine nature. And it's important that the man knows that.
But I think men are confused, it seems to me, because, for the last 30 years, whatever you want to say, 35 years, women have taken initiative. Women have said don't open that door for me, I can do that myself. And I think that can be confusing to men. I know I walk through the city, I might walk into a store. This happens all the time. A row, a line of maybe 4 or 5 guys is on the other side of the door. I open the door and they smile at me and go, thanks, and they all file past me. Every once in a while, I'll have a guy stop and let me through. And, you know, some of it could just be they're just not even thinking. You know, they're just in their own world. But I think some of it is that guys just don't know how we want them to act. And so I think sometimes they're maybe afraid to take initiative. They're afraid to take that role. And so they hold back.
To me, a real man or a Christian man is a broken man. You know, he is a weak man. And as we talked about, imperfect but transformed. So I think for the Christian man, or the definition of Christian manhood, is a man who understands this about himself. And Paul talks about how he will boast of his weaknesses. And we know that when we are weak, God is strong. And he is made perfect through our weakness. And we are made perfect through our weakness. And so as I said before, we need to lead with our weakness. So a man today, a Christian man today, needs to understand that about himself. He needs to understand that he needs other men in his life. A man cannot lead himself. He needs to first be led. And of course, Christ did this in his ministry. He had the apostles, he summoned them, he galvanized them, and then he led them for 3 years. He trained them, he mentored them, and then, you know, he let them go.
Particularly when you're talking about single men who are having these difficulties with maybe asking women out or being afraid of rejection or whatever, you know, that they can have some community with each other to talk about this, not to commiserate with each other and to talk about how rough it is out there, but to support each other and encourage each other. And, you know, probably also having some men who are married who can give some input in that is helpful. And a priest, a good priest, who can give some spiritual direction. I think prayer has to be part of it too.
Our first and foremost relationship with what it means to be a man is the relationship with our fathers. So if that starts to break down, which has broken down in our culture in a terrible way when you consider, you know, like 24 million boys growing up absent their biological father, you're looking at a lot of broken men. So at the core of that issue is this brokenness. So that manifests itself in all kind of ways, this brokenness, this lack of mentorship.
I mean, now there's a word that in some circles is verboten, but I think we have to recover it, what it means to be a manly man. And among the things it means to be a manly man is to know that God has endowed you with the capacity to care for, in every sense of the word, of care for, love, protect, enhance a woman.
I mean, it can't just be about sort of the mechanics of dating and, you know, how we ask someone out or, you know, what's my most impressive line. I mean, it also has to be really done prayerfully. And I think for men, you know, St. Joseph is a wonderful model for that. And so, you know, pray to him and ask for his strength, because he definitely had to be strong to take care of Mary and Jesus and all that they had to go through, especially in Jesus' early life, but to also have that gentleness and caring, that heart for another person.
And I'm reminded of that image of Rembrandt, the prodigal son, where you see the father embracing the son, the prodigal. And one hand is very masculine, and one hand is very feminine, or very, not feminine, but just smaller in stature. And that is the perfect integration of a man. A man needs to have both, and he needs to call upon those. So he can't always be the negative side of a warrior where he's constantly making war. He needs to be in battle, he needs to lead, he needs to activate that in himself. But he can't be warring with everybody. He needs to draw back and be a lover, and be a lover of women, be a lover of his community.
Different from femininity, masculinity needs to be learned more so than femininity, because women have the nurturing, the nurture characteristic built right into them. We as men have much more complexities in our lives due to the fact that we are called in a lot of different directions. Our family, the workplace, the common good. Not that women don't have a role in all of those things, but men, we have a primary role in all of those things. So it can create some sort of confusion there. It can create difficulty. I think it really hit home with me when a priest friend of mine said to me, you know, the fact that men's spiritual life is not as simple as it first seems. A lot of times, you know, women will make the claim, and even men, we're just simple. You know, give us the remote, let it put us in front of the TV, everything is just fine. But when it comes to spiritual matters, it's much more complex than that. And so we need to, as men, from my experience, from the mentorship that I've been given over the past 3 or 4 years, it is absolutely essential for us to unite to one another so that we are accountable to one another, so that we're fighting some battle together ultimately, right? Because there is a battle going on in our culture between good and evil, and it cannot be fought alone.
Well, those are poignant segments. There's a lot covered. Obviously, there's a lot of issues that affect men today. I mean, in fact, we live in a time where men are pretty much made to be, I don't know what the proper word would be, but they certainly are made to look like weaklings, like they don't, I don't know, these sitcoms, everything, you know, they're really like doofuses. That's the only word I keep coming to mind here, you know, but I mean, we really have to bring back the sense of men's proper place in society, and I think men are maybe reacting to this. Even good Catholic men might be reacting to all this nonsense about, you know, that of what society is saying they are being, whether it's in their weaknesses, or they are only interested in sex, or whether they have no confidence, they lack commitment, all these things. It's almost like they're subscribing to it.
An attack on virility, an attack on men, trying to pull men down, really is an attack on God. Satan hates God, but God in himself is untouchable. You can't hurt God in and of himself. So Satan decides that he will attack human beings who are created in God's image. And anything he can do in order to distort the image of God in man, he chalks up as a successful attack on God. So attacking the role of the husband as the head of the family, or the dignity of the adult male, is definitely an attack on God.
Mm. How do you feel about this, Steve, in your own experiences of being out there and dating and trying to make the best of your life and progress towards your vocation? Do you see this and sense it, and is it in your friends, and, you know, what's the sense there?
Well, there is a lot of negative publicity. There's a lot of, you know, men bashing, if you want to say, and you know, it comes from a number of factors. But I really believe that men need to you know, not be affected by that, and really strive towards being the people that Jesus Christ made them to be strong people, to be holy men, to be chivalrous, you know, all those good qualities, and to really seek the qualities of Jesus Christ, you know, to be meek, to be humble, to be strong, to be perseverant, to be forgiving. All those qualities are important when you're pursuing a woman in a relationship. So I think a lot of guys are prone to the negativity that's around them, what they hear from women about them, about guys in general, what they see on television shows. You're right, it's not a positive portrayal of men at all. And then, as Father's saying, I really do think that the devil acts to bring us down as men, and we lose our self-confidence. And what kind of people are we? Look at how we're portrayed on every television show out there.
Yeah, and in all of the possibilities that are out there of how men can be, and, you know, whether it is really them hurting themselves by their own fault, or whether it's no fault of their own, their upbringing, what have you, what it still comes down to is making that commitment in marriage. Father, what would you say is essential that a man needs to have as far as the qualities and to have that ability to make that commitment?
Well, it's fundamental that anybody who looks for leadership has to be a leader of his own self. There's a famous Latin proverb, vincit qui se vincit. Vincit qui se vincit, which means literally, he conquers who himself conquers. He conquers who conquers himself. And so a real man is a man who is able to control his own actions. A real man is a man who is able to experience the emotion of anger, but to suppress it. I did not say repress it, I said suppress it. That strong image that we have, and you know, such icons as John Wayne. Some people might laugh at that. Oh, John Wayne, you're talking something from the 50s, you know. No, that's a perennial image. Not just John Wayne by any means, but the strong man who has reserves of strength, who has conquered himself, and therefore is to be respected by others. A man has to conquer his own impulses. Many men, boys, and adolescents experience a desire to pleasure themselves illicitly, immorally, and they must fight against that. The Catholic Church has always taught that we must not pleasure ourselves. I presume that you know what I mean. And so overcoming one's own desires to use one's own physical capacities for oneself, that's a great struggle. And for some men, it's a greater struggle than others.
Yes, absolutely. Do you agree with that, with struggle?
I completely agree, because we're in a society where it's all about pleasure, unfortunately. We're in a society that says whatever is good for the moment. Let's live for the moment. Let's drink and be merry and pleasure ourselves. And that's what we are being, unfortunately, force-fed by society. And that's not the way to live. The way to live is to go to Jesus, to pick up our crosses. And we all have struggles. We all have temptations. It's around us every day. And really to just be strong and be persistent in prayer, and God will provide for all that we need. I really believe that, and that's been that's been true in the lives, I know, of a lot of men. We are definitely tempted each and every day, each and every moment of our lives.
Well, in fact, wouldn't you agree, men have to first acknowledge that we, just because of fallen human nature and, of course, backgrounds, all kinds of things, we're just fundamentally broken people. We have to acknowledge that in us, and not let it be an excuse for behavior patterns, but to use that to our advantage, don't you think?
Absolutely. The fundamental data is conveyed to us in Genesis. We are a fallen human race. Human nature was wounded, but there's an important distinction to be made here. The Catholic Church teaches that original sin has wounded human nature. There is an alternate interpretation of that which the Catholic Church rejects, namely that human nature has been destroyed by sin. It has been totally corrupted. We say, no, it hasn't been totally corrupted. Even after sin and the whole history of sin in the human race, human nature is fundamentally good. That's a very important point. And so those heretical, if I may use the word heretical, not a politically correct word these days, those heretical interpretations of Christianity that say that human nature is fundamentally destroyed, and so you may as well just give into it and, sin and just depend on God to smile and say, oh, you poor little boy, you can't control yourself, but I forgive you, because no, that's not true. God calls us, he forgives us, yes, but he calls us to do better.
How important do you think are role models for men who are trying to climb forward, climb out of this or move forward in all this?
Incredibly important, Anthony. I think that there, unfortunately, are not enough strong role models out there for men. I don't know if the case can be made for women too, but probably. I really believe in our society today, we need to look towards good, holy people as role models. And of course, the holiest of all is Jesus Christ. I mean, to just look to him. in anything and everything we're going through, and to imitate him as best we can in our lives. Unfortunately, in our society, we look towards Hollywood figures or athletes making millions of dollars, and we have to realize that they, like us, are prone to sin and failings. And we sometimes put our trust in them instead of putting our trust in him, capital H, Almighty God.
Father, last word on that?
John Paul II caught the imagination of so many of us, and he was a great blessing to us because of his virility, his manliness, his very apparent manliness, and his manliness manifested itself as fatherliness. You looked at him and you just said, Father, Holy Father, Holy Father. That was not simply a title. And now we have Benedict XVI. Benedict XVI is a different person in appearance, but I see great virility in Benedict XVI. I see virility in him in his recent declaration, releasing the Tridentine Mass. Now, I'm not speaking in favor or against the Tridentine Mass. That's not my point. But he did that against considerable opposition. He did what he knew was right, okay? And also in his recent reaffirmation of Dominus Jesus, in which he said that the Catholic Church is the church established by Jesus Christ. That took courage, because a lot of people thought, but Benedict XVI is a very courageous man. He's an icon of virility.
It's very good. Well, that's all the time we have for this segment. There's so much to talk about when it comes to men, but certainly, men are called to be courageous and make commitments. And the first commitment, of course, is starting with working on yourself, believing in yourself, and of course, the commitment to something as important as prayer and life with God. And things come from that. So we work on those things, and we pray for men, because it is a time of terrible lack of commitment towards them and their needs. Please go to our website, www.roadtocana.com, and there are resources there. There are these programs, Road to Cana programs, and share them with others, and let's help with this fight and helping men and women to build up what they need to become tomorrow's husbands and wives. And remember, while you're on this road, remember that God has a plan for you, and to keep Christ's peace with you always.